Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Script Department. I'm John. I'm joined today by Asim, and we're going to be talking about intellectual property. Before we get into that, if you haven't already, do check out our website, thescriptdepartment.net, where you can find all the latest projects that we're getting up to with our global network of screenwriters. Hit us up on social media, hit the links in the description, or find us on our podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, just search for The Script Department and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Asim, so you proposed the idea for today's discussion, intellectual property, and the importance of thinking about your work as an intellectual property from a business standpoint, from an industry standpoint. Kind of tell me where you're coming from with this, and let's see where we can take the discussion.
I think like when we see screenwriters and how they create these worlds and characters and the storylines of any kind of video, films or TV series or animation or even comic books or novels, these things are created from scratch, and what makes me want to talk about this concept and this idea is that screenwriter in particular, they get actually paid less than directors and actors and producers in that perspective, although they are the original, concept ideas. So if we take, for example, what do you make when you're writing a film and you want to create these characters and you spend so much time with them, you have to understand that these characters should not just relate to your own film. It's possible that other characters or other writers and producers want to take one of your characters and want to do a spin-off of that. And we saw that with the Fast and Furious, franchise when they took Sean Hobbs with Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham, and which is total different character, never been introduced, from the first time they actually introduced the Fast and Furious in 2001. But those two characters evolved, along the journey. And they did the spinoff, but still they are getting paid. The creators of that kind of characters like Gary Scott Thompson and Chris Morgan, they still own the rights for these characters. And every time you see the movie, it's called Characters Created by Gary Thompson and Chris Morgan, which indicates that they already have the royalties, they already have the money. They are responsible about giving the yes and giving the no of going into another franchise or another spinoff.
So what we're talking about here really is the idea of you've created a piece of intellectual property when you wrote a script, when you created your characters and you created your world. And really it's about, I think, being clever enough to hold on to those things that are your property. I think this is a conversation mainly aimed at aspiring screenwriters who might be unaware of how the industry works, or might be convinced or talked easily into giving away or signing away their characters. We've seen countless stories over the years of people who've been paid ridiculously low sums of money for the rights to characters. I think the Superman story is the creation of Superman has a somewhat unfortunate story like that.
Yeah. When Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster actually created Superman back in 1939, and they stayed for a couple of years creating them, and then DC came, and at that time it was Detective Comics, and they bought the right to have Superman with them into that universe. Like after they got into that DC kind of comic company, they actually bought the rights, but it didn't buy the rights as they bought the people to get out of the Superman character and bring someone else to write for them. And for a long time, those two creators didn't have any kind of revenue of what Superman makes. And when God plays in a different way, as they say, back in 1970, when they wanted to do the first film for Superman, um, they were acquired to get the approval from the creators. And this is where DC was in a big trouble. And they have to go back to Schuster and Siegel and ask their permission to do, Superman. But at the time, they already have a lawyer, and and the lawyer was smart enough to get back all the payments from the previous 3 or 4 decades ago without being paid. And now they are getting paid to get the royalties of everything related to Superman. And this is a very good way not to sell your characters easily, and not to get. I know when you're a newbie and being a screenwriter, you just want to get your script, to the producer's hand and get it, done. But that doesn't mean you actually sell all your rights. You sell only the script, but that doesn't mean you sell the rights for the characters. And if we take Stan Lee, he's one of the biggest bad example when he sold Spider-Man, in his peak, and in the late 60s, early 70s, and he sold for $1 million for Marvel. And now, how much Spider-Man is actually making? He is a multi-billion-dollar asset, and for that, screenwriters should be aware about how they created the characters and how they stuck to them for the long journey.
Yeah, it is. It's worth saying. I mean, I don't know what $1 million in the '60s would translate to now. I'm sure it would be a pretty big payday either way. But when you think about the money that the Marvel universe generates annually, in every respect, whether it's games, movies, TV, merchandise, T-shirts, you name it. According to Google, when Stan Lee passed away, it was $50 million was his net worth. Now, that's a lot of money, obviously. I mean, no one would deny that's some serious money. But when you think about the value of the intellectual properties that he created,
Yes.
when you think about that, the value of what he created, um,
It's beyond.
yeah,
I mean, it's a very high number. If we see why Disney bought Marvel, and they started the Marvel Studios back in 2009. This is where everything started with Disney, and they bought it for $4 billion. Just imagine, $4 billion. And after that, they started, with the Iron Man. And they started with the Thor in 2011. Then they started the entire franchise for the Marvel universe. And with that, how many $1 billion they actually made on the side? So they actually paid off their, let's say, the debt they had. They paid already the 4 billion, and they're still making money, and that for Marvel actually helped them to still continue. And let's not forget, back in 1990s, all the comic publishers like DC and Marvel, they all had a huge bankruptcy kind of system where they're bankrupt, and they wanted someone to buy them out. And I remember stories, I think one of the funniest stories is Michael Jackson wanted to buy Marvel, and he met Stan Lee. And the only reason he wanted to buy Marvel is to act as Spider-Man in a movie. And I think this is one of the biggest reasons Stan Lee took to his guns and said, no, we're not going to buy Marvel. We're going to buy property of Marvel, which is the characters. And this is where they sold the X-Men to Fox, and they sold the Daredevil to Fox, and with that, they managed to cover up some of their losses and get back on their feet and still continue by printing and making comics. But that doesn't mean that they still own the rights. They own the rights only in the comic decision, but in the movies they don't have it. And now, after Disney acquiring Fox as well, so they already have the X-Men, and they already have the Daredevil product, and they already, I think, they have also the Fantastic Four.
yeah.
So it's a huge there's a
And
huge
that was a
benefit.
$70 billion deal,
Yes.
which, I mean, I genuinely believe they bought Fox for X-Men.
Yes.
I don't believe they bought Fox for the Die Hard franchise,
No.
or for a collection of 80s movie classics. The big movies that came out of Fox in the 21st century have always, I mean, pretty much been comic book adaptations.
Yes. And don't forget the
And
Simpson. The
And The
Simpsons was a
Simpsons,
huge
and The
success
Simpsons as
with
well.
the Fox, you know.
Yeah, Simpsons,
And
Family Guy, all that kind of stuff as well.
yes,
But again, I think they bought. I genuinely believe that it was X-Men, and in a weird way, Hugh Jackman
yeah.
that made that deal worth $70 billion. But it is, all the examples you've given are, it is true. Hollywood doesn't pay, it doesn't pay well, right? It'll dangle a big paycheck in front of you, but it's rarely the paycheck that you, and I get it. I mean, they can't just throw money at everybody. I completely get that. But I think there's something to be said for being more prophetic when it comes to evaluating intellectual property. You mentioned the Fast and the Furious. I think the Fast and Furious is an incredible example of an intellectual property that was probably worth nothing in 2001,
Yes,
and is now one of the most valuable properties, one of the most valuable franchises in Hollywood history.
yes,
Now, the first Fast and Furious film, a lot of people might not remember this. It was not a good film.
no.
It was not a great film. It was not a spectacle event. It was just fast cars, right? That's all. It was,
Drag race. Yeah,
yeah, it was, and it was fine. It is what it is, but it wasn't the Mission Impossible level franchise that it is now. Even the Mission Impossible franchise wasn't that back then. Fast and Furious 2, like Too Fast, Too Furious, was like one of the worst movies of the year
exactly.
in terms of major movies. And the third one, Tokyo Drift, was like a spin-off. They had so little faith in bringing back all the characters. Like Vin Diesel appears as a cameo at the very end.
Yes.
Like that's how little faith everybody had in this franchise. But they stuck to their guns and they kept at it and they kept believing in it for one reason or another. They kept hammering away at this franchise to the point where it became something worth taking notice of. And I do believe that a lot of the great franchises, a lot of the great valuable properties of Hollywood are cases where people didn't have faith in it, but a few key people believed in it enough and stuck with it that it got somewhere. Marvel banked everything. They mortgaged all their properties in order to be able to make Iron Man. It was a gamble, but they believed in it. They believed we can do something cool here. We all know George Lucas. No one had faith in Star Wars when it was made, but Spielberg did, and Lucas did, and a few key people believed in the vision, and it paid off. And it is the common. We talked about Resident Evil. We did a review of Resident Evil recently, and the new Resident Evil film. And I always said that's another example of Hollywood just sticking with it, whether the critics like it or not, whether moviegoers like it or not. If you stick with it enough, audiences eventually take notice and say, they're trying something here, so let's give it a chance. Or somebody believes that this has value, so why not give it a chance? And my point being that so many of the great valuable intellectual property started from nothing, started from a place where only the creator really had the belief that this would work. But by believing in the project, sticking with it, and having that foresight to know that one day it could be worth something. Vin Diesel is now one of the most valuable players in the industry. And when Vin Diesel is 70, he'll be one of the most powerful producers in Hollywood. I have no doubt.
Yes.
I have no doubt.
Don't forget, he started as a producer.
Yeah.
I mean, do you remember the film Riddick?
Yeah.
It's actually based on a video game. He is the creator of that.
Oh, really?
So
okay.
He used the video game to make it as a feature film, and I think he did trilogy like for that.
Yeah.
And this is where Vin Diesel became some kind of a way a popular action figure. This is where it started with him. But I think the success of Fast and Furious came in Fast Five, where they were in the Brazil, and the story goes by is, I don't know how accurate it is, but this is from a hush hush people. It says that it wasn't supposed for to be for the Fast and Furious. It was supposed to be the Brazilian job, like the Italian job,
Ah, okay.
and they actually wanted to go to the old team with Jason Statham, Charles Theron, and Mark Wahlberg, but they actually refused to do that for some kind of creative differences. And this is where I think Vin Diesel got the chance to read the script and include it into the Fast and Furious franchise. And this is where actually everything become much more better
Hmm.
than
Yeah, yeah,
before.
yeah. But isn't it proof that, it's that refusal to let go? It's that
Yes,
refuse,
yes,
and it's that saying, I believe in this thing
yeah,
and sticking with it. And it's I don't know if he came on as an early investor in the IP in the franchise, when he
yes,
was starring in the first film, or if he ended up acquiring the franchise. But whatever way, he acquired it, and he was savvy enough to make it work and to see those opportunities and make it work. I mean, so we talked about Lucas, we've talked about all these. We know the story. It's such an old story now about Lucas, saying, taking the merchandising deal, and everyone
yes,
thought he was crazy, but he saw value in the merchandising for Star Wars. He was smart enough to know, and he's now a billionaire because of it.
yes.
And Disney itself sold for what, like, or sorry, Lucasfilm sold for like 5 billion to Disney.
Mm.
Um, Earlier in was it 2012? I think somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, and
And
don't forget that Lucas also, sometimes you need to make sacrifice in order to get your dreams. He sacrificed a huge paycheck in the 70s, like for 1.5 million to write and direct the Star Wars, the first one. And he said, no, I will take 150 and you give me 10% from what you make from the merchandise. And in 1 year, he made $100 million from the merchandise. Just imagine, in 1 year, you became a billionaire and you don't need to ask them anything else anymore. You proven yourself, you prove your idea, you prove your concept. And screenwriters should actually focus on that point, because um, don't let your dreams go just to give it any kind of producer. You have to stick to your guns. You have to stick to a right producer who will actually invest in your property, in your intellectual property, and also in your vision, where you're gonna go with this one. And you have to be smart enough. Now everything is about prequels, sequels, animation. They turn everything from a film to a TV series, or vice versa, and games now. And we saw this one now with The Witcher. It started as a novel, then a game, then comic books. Now we are seeing it as a TV series.
yes, it is. It's a very good point. The industry has now evolved way beyond just making movies. When Lucas was making Star Wars, when Stan Lee was creating Spider-Man, they weren't thinking about all of the different multimedia that was available, that just wasn't available back then. I've always said it's inexcusable for filmmakers and storytellers now to not be thinking about games. You get lots of people say, "Oh, I don't know anything about games. I don't know anything about video games." That's inexcusable in 2022. The games industry is arguably more profitable than movies. The acquisition recently for Activision Blizzard by Microsoft was
Yes.
three billion short of the Fox merger or the Fox deal. Right,
Yeah.
that's how huge, $67 billion we're talking about.
Yes.
That's how much money Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, all those kind of games are worth. And you cannot sit on the fence anymore and say, well, games aren't for me. It's like saying television is for you, or books aren't for you, or music isn't for you. No, there's certain things in music that you might not like, but there'll be certain things in music that you will like. There's certain TV shows that you'll like. There's certain books that you will read. There's some that you won't. There will be certain games that are out there that will appeal to you. You just haven't found them yet. You just haven't allowed yourself to to expose yourself to that medium, which, is so important now, because when you go and pitch a movie or when you go and pitch a TV show, you have to be able to show that there is a return for their investment, because they're investing in you. It's like a company. And it's not enough to say, you wouldn't go to a bank and say, oh, I want to open a business, but I only want to run it for 6 months. You got to be able to run it for 6 years at least.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And it's the same with a TV show. You can't just say, I want, $20 million to make a TV show, but we're only going to do one season. No, they're going to want to maximize their investment. They're going to want to make sure that if they're investing in all of these sets and costumes or whatever, and these actors, they want to make sure that they're getting several seasons worth. And it's more important, arguably, to be able to pitch a long-term vision for a series than it is to pitch a great pilot. Because you can fix the pilot, but if there's just no vision for the show long term, then it's, and movies have to be returnable as well. We talk about television as returnable in terms of multiple seasons and so on. Movies have to be returnable, and they have to be, and even if it's just one movie, that doesn't mean you can't have the spin-off stuff that goes with it. That doesn't mean you can't have maybe a collection of short films on YouTube with some high-profile actors that are spin-offs of the movie that will get, tens of millions of hits on YouTube that will bring in money then, some of that Google money, or if it is an action adventure, like, is there going to be a video game or an app that can go with it? Is there some sort of ad revenue we can attach to it? Like, you've got to be thinking about all of this stuff. And
do you remember The Matrix? It actually started. I read this huge article about it and how the Wachowskis were so smart and how to convince producers do it. They started with it as a comic book.
Yeah.
Then they actually did the animation ones. The short couple of animation short films, then they start to do the first movie, the second movie, the third movie, and now the fourth movie. And they did probably 2 games now, video games for the Matrix. And the same thing goes with The Lord of the Rings. It started as a novel, then in 1975 it came out as an animation. I saw it. It was nothing like what we saw from the film, and it was the Two Towers. Then we saw the trilogy with George, with Jackson. Then now we are seeing the TV series. So.
And there's been countless games in between as well, exactly. and everything else.
Yeah, and the merchandise and the comics and the novels and whatever, and the reprints, everything came back to reprint. And this is what makes screenwriters should actually think about how they actually maximize the use of their characters and make all your characters unique, make them all 4-dimensional. That's why they will. One of your characters will appeal to one of the producers you never thought this character will appeal to. And he will want only that character to take a spinoff. And you should have something at least ready for one season for a TV series,
Yeah, no, and I don't think that a lot of the seriously wealthy people, producers and execs and screenwriters that you see in Hollywood now would be as well off as they were if they hadn't been thinking along those lines. I don't think The Matrix would have gotten made if it had been pitched 10 years earlier. Because I don't think studios would have seen the potential for multimedia tie-in. And The Matrix came out right at the kind of the peak of the MTV VH1 kind of generation. And the idea of making this thing that just completely connected in and plugged into all of the different type of multimedia that was out there, that resonated with gamers, that resonated with those that were taking a real interest in the future of the online world. It was a no-brainer, to make this. And yeah, I think it's funny because when you watch The Matrix Resurrections, they're trying so hard to comment on where our society is now in terms of our use of all this technology, and games and so on and so forth. and it's just further evidence that you have to be plugged into all of that stuff now. It doesn't mean that your drama, your personal drama about a family going through a divorce, for example, or the death of a loved one, after battling with addiction, or something, something kind of tragic like that. It's not to say you're going to make stuff, you're not going to make loads of movies out of that, or you're not going to make, but if you are somebody who is making, who's doing something like a whodunit, or you're doing something like a heist story, or you're creating a character that is kind of a larger than life
Yes.
Adventurer, it is so easy now to be able to look at what others have done and to model your blueprint off of that.
Yeah.
And people will take an interest in you because you've got a business plan, and movies like that and television shows like that require lots of investment. The person investing $2 million into a family tragedy story is not they're not interested in all the spin-offs and all that, because $2 million is not a lot to have to make a return on. But if you're going to need $50 million for your movie, give us more than just the movie, or give us the potential, give us the promise for it. I think it's worth talking about the way now that deals are made and the way that the industry has evolved and changed since the days of Lucas and Stanley and all that. Nowadays everything is about acquisitions. It's about acquiring catalogs of IP.
Yes.
It's why Microsoft bought Activision Blizzard. It's why Sony just recently bought the Bungie, the studio behind the original Halo and Destiny. They're buying IP. They're buying a catalog of games that they can profit from years from now. They're buying talent, but talent comes and go in these types of companies. There's lots of turnaround in games companies, as there are in film production companies as well.
Yes.
What they're really investing in here is the IP. And if you think about the way that deals are made with Netflix now, for example, and all streaming platforms are kind of using Netflix as shorthand here. I don't know if Spielberg would be a billionaire if he had made deals with, if he had to make the kind of deals that one has to make now in order to get a movie made by a streaming platform. Because normally when these streaming platforms buy your movie, or bankroll your movie or your TV show or whatever, they're, like any movie studio, owning the rights to it. But there's a lot less flexibility than there was before. You're not getting the George Lucas deal now. You're not going to be able to go in and say, all right, I'll take a huge pay cut if you give me 10% of the royalties, because they have huge marketing departments now who are way smarter than the execs at Fox were in 1976, or whenever those deals were being signed.
And don't forget that they are playing on the merchandise more than, and if we see Netflix, ever since they got some kind of IPs right now, they're putting the market as their target. They want to do action figures, they want to do T-shirts, they want to do all sorts of things that can actually be bought, not just seen on Netflix. Although the Netflix is losing a lot of viewers and a lot of stocks market, but still they are acquiring IPs. And if we remember the first film on Netflix made by Netflix, like Bright, and this is the first time they brought Will Smith as an A-star, a Hollywood star, and they gave Max Landis $3 million for the script only, not just directed, just for the script. But that's it. And now we are seeing a TV series about Bright and animation, and Max Landis has nothing to do with it, And although it's created by Max Landis and everything, but still, as you said, they bought the rights for everything now.
I think part of that is that, and is a good example. Max Landis, I think, did fall out of favor with Netflix because of allegations that were brought against him, and I don't know anything more about that, so I'm not going to comment on that. But it was it is proof that they don't need you, the author. They will continue making them without you, and that's a line in the Matrix Resurrections. When Neo, or Thomas Anderson, who's working as a game designer at that point, he's like, "Oh, I don't want to make another game," and they're like, "Look, the studio is going to make it with or without us. We might as well just be involved in it." That's the kind of there is a serious lack of control, I think, nowadays, unless you are somebody very powerful. If your name is worth more than the property itself, then you're okay. You can have a say in what the deal is because it's your name that they're paying for. But if it's a case where it's the property is more valuable, or if it's the property that if they don't care about you, then you're never going to be able to make the kind of deals that the big tycoons the big captains of the film industry were able to make back in the day. And Knives Out is a great example of this. So Knives Out made something like, I think it cost like $30 million or something to make. And it made something around the lines of $300 million at the box office. I mean, silly money compared to how much it cost. And then the Rian Johnson, the writer and director, had an auction. And I'm basing this on Wikipedia. I knew about the deal, but according to Wikipedia, he had an auction for the rights to Knives Out 2 and 3. And he was able to sell the rights, or at least license the rights, although I would say it's sell, for $460 million for Knives Out 2 and 3. Now, that's insane, right? And Daniel Craig is getting $100 million for the next two movies, That's insane money for movies that for essentially whodunit movies, which never make that much money at the box office, because whodunits don't exactly have massive replay. You can have a great time watching The Matrix and you want to go back and see it again. Nobody's going back to see a movie that, I mean, I'm sure people will, but generally speaking, the format of a whodunit, once you know the answer, and you're not really going back to kind of watch the investigation play out a second time. You probably want to take a year away from it and kind of forget a bit about it and then watch it again on Netflix later. Netflix paid $460 million for the rights to Knives Out 2 and 3. Now, this is obviously a great deal for Rian Johnson, that he has the power to be able to do that, right? And I'm sure down the line we're going to get books as well about this character. This is a character that Daniel Craig can play right into his 80s. There's not going to be any car chases. There's not going to be any him jumping through walls or any of the kind of stuff he has to do in Casino Royale. So this is perfect for him moving into the, if he has to slow down a little because of Bond, of what the toll Bond took on him, this is a great franchise for him. But is it worth $460 million? It's probably worth more than that. It's probably worth a lot more than that. And because if the first movie made $300 million, a completely original IP from a guy who, has his fans from Star Wars, but also didn't, lost a lot of fans because of Star Wars. I mean, for all the people who love Rian Johnson, there are a lot of people who didn't like what he did with those Star Wars films. And so the idea that this completely original IP made huge money, the sequel is going to make even more. Knives Out 2 is going to be a huge success. I am wondering why he had that auction, or why those rights were sold for $400. I have to believe it had something to do with the pandemic. But
yeah. I think also, don't forget that it takes so much time to get your revenue in movies, and like it takes a couple of years to get back. And as for him, this is a win-win situation. You get $460 million in one check. That doesn't require staying for at least 10 years ahead just to wait to get that kind of money investment.
I mean, the money's probably going to be staggered. Yeah. It'll probably be, give us a script and we'll give you this and give us that. But yeah, he's entitled to $460 million. He could turn in I'm sure they had he already had the treatments and the pitches and all that ready, and they probably saw it and said, "Yeah, okay, there's good vision." But you know what, Daniel Craig, I love Daniel Craig, but let's say hypothetically he just wants to phone this in and deliver the worst performance of his life, which I know he won't do. But imagine if he did. They're still getting their money. There's no question. There's no kind of they're just, yeah, it's just getting that. You don't have to wait. You don't have to wait for the pandemic to dictate how much money we're going to make. It's you don't have to wait until the movie theaters open again. You've already made your money back. The problem though is, are they making the mistake that, and I know, look, $400 million, what are we talking about here? What are we complaining about here, right? But one of the things we've been talking about is the idea of not being so quick to just sign away everything. Have faith in your project, believe that your project is worth something, and hand it over, or sorry, not hand it over. Have faith in it, believe in it, let it develop, let it grow, let it build an audience over years, so that it'll be worth even more down the line. Is Ryan Johnson throwing that wisdom out the window and actually just taking the quick money, even if it's a lot of money? Is he just taking the quick money when he could actually be doing the George Lucas thing of banking on his name, banking on his reputation, because he is a very, very talented storyteller, banking on the cast and the characters he's created, and saying, no, we're going to put it out into movie theaters instead, and we're going to make more money than the last Bond film made, because we believe in this project and we're going to market it well. I don't know. I there's a part of me that thinks great for Ryan Johnson, but there's also a part of me that thinks, have you just made the mistake that a lot of first-time writers make?
Yes.
You've just done it on a bigger level.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my
I think when Netflix bought the rights for that, I think they didn't just buy the 2 and 3. I think they also, because if you buy the rights, you have the entire thing to do with it. You can do TV series, you can do spin-offs, you can do comics, you can do merchandise about it. So, but in the end, he's not getting any of that money. If we take, let's say,
I'm assuming. Sorry, I'm assuming he's not going to get any money because
no.
There was all this talk when Activision was sold to Microsoft. Is Call of Duty going to stay on Xbox, or is it going to be cross-platform? Are we ever going to see a Call of Duty on PlayStation again? And some of the comments coming out were, before anything was clarified, and things still have yet to be clarified to a full degree. But at the time, it was, last week or whenever it was, people were saying, yeah, you don't pay $70 billion to share it with everybody. You pay $70 billion to stop everybody else from making money off of it. And I don't know, if you're Netflix, are you paying $450 million, almost $500 million, for 2 movies to just have distribution rights? Or are you paying $500 million so that you can write your own Knives Out spin-off television shows, Knives Out, a prequel TV show set in the 80s,
Yes.
something like that? Is that what they're doing? And is Ryan Johnson going to be removed from that? If Ryan Johnson doesn't want to play ball, is he now removed from that?
I think so. I think because in the end, don't forget, they also want to do this kind of deal to raise their stock market. And with their latest thing that happened, I think they need something like a very huge, you know, line in the media that says, okay, we bought the rights for 460 for just 2 movies. But in the background, as they say, they have more than that. They want to do a lot of things with this kind of IP property, and they will never pay for Daniel for 100 million just for 2 movies, and that's it. They are planning to use him as much as they can. Actually, they're going to cash in their way all the way until he's actually said, okay, I'm out of that. If we say, like, there's a huge difference also between licensing and also selling. Like, if we go back to Fox, they Marvel licensed the rights for the X-Men and the Daredevil for Fox for 10 years. And if we started from 1992, until 2003. When it actually hit 2003, what happened? We saw the Daredevil movie with Ben Affleck, and people don't like it, but I still love it. But it doesn't mean they didn't really put their effort in the movie. It's just because they needed to do this movie, or their license will go back to Marvel. So once they did that movie, it stayed for another 10 years. And then what happened? Netflix came in and we saw the Daredevil, TV series, and which is a huge success for 3 seasons. And we never saw that. But because the mentality changed, they gave them more freedom. They brought in some kind of a new style of how to approach TV series than before, and not fearing of using difficult kind of cinematic angles and cameras and also moves, and especially with the corridor fight. It's similar to Old Boy fight, So I think that raised the question about selling or just releasing or giving
You are
a
right. So
license.
that's a big part of it. Almost feels like that's a big part of Ben Affleck's career. Actually, is the
Yeah,
idea of, because he did the same with he's been kind of in limbo for years with Batman as well. He was in
yeah,
Batman vs Superman, and there was all these talks of him getting his own Batman movie that he was going to be writing, and then that fell apart and all that. And it is very much. It seems like he shows up every now and again in a DC movie as a kind of a cameo role. Really, I mean, not. I don't think he'll be showing up anymore, but he was there for a while, popping up. I think in maybe 2 or 3 different movies, and Justice League as well, and so on. And it does feel like he's almost like a victim of that way of doing business, doesn't it?
yes,
But the because I don't think that was great for his. I don't know. I feel like he's such a talented filmmaker now. I do feel like we've been deprived of a lot of great Ben Affleck stuff while he
yes,
was doing Batman. And I
yeah,
liked his turn as Batman, but I just didn't think the movies were very good, And so it's a case. Anyway, that's a different conversation. But
yeah,
so I mean, let's talk about it. Kind of IPs as an investment, right?
yeah,
I do think it's very important. You've touched on this already. I mean, this is your point, really, but it's the idea of when you create these characters. We'll be doing a whole episode on character creation, but when you're creating your characters and you're creating your world, if you're creating something that you believe has the ability to be franchised out, if you something that you believe has the ability to continue to make money for you down the line and not just simply be sold as a script, you need to value it because it is an investment in yourself.
yes,
It's like buying property, or it's like buying real gold jewelry or a diamond necklace or something, or diamond earrings, whatever. It's an investment. It might be a lot of money to spend, but you can sell it years later if you wanted to, or it can be part of your assets,
yes,
your kind of, in terms of your valuation. And I do genuinely believe that screenwriters don't have they we don't tend, or we're not encouraged to value the stuff we're creating as an investment in our careers. I've often thought, what is the value, even though we don't own any of the stories on the script department that are written by other people outside of our own close team. We showcase that work. But I've often thought, what would the value be if an industry analyst came in and kind of assigned a value to each story and each character and the promise of more stories to come and so on? What would the value of that catalog be? And the value of Netflix isn't in how well their business is doing in terms of subscribers or anything like that. The value of Netflix is how much money is there to be made on all the different stuff they own, that they've created, that they've paid money for, including Knives Out now.
yes,
And I think writers need to be thinking about themselves in that way. You don't have to be Netflix to start analyzing the value of that stuff. Unfortunately, we're not encouraged to think like that, because scripts get sold and you just take your check and you walk away. You're commissioned to write a script. You don't own any of that.
yeah,
Uh,
If there's I don't know if you're a comic book fan. There's a huge rival, like some kind of a court issue between Ted McFarlane, the creator of Spawn, and Neil Gaiman for characters they created back in the 1990s. And until now, it's been going for the last 20 years. And now they settled down on giving Neil Gaiman the rights for these characters and all the profits that happened along these 20 years. And although that Ted McFarlane actually asked Neil Gaiman to come and write for him, but Neil also created new characters that added to the Spawn world and the Spawn universe. So don't think that creating characters is not important. It's important even if it's not for you, even if you came on, for someone else and write for them, but you created another stories, another characters. Don't forget that these characters are actually important for you because you're going to benefit from that. And that doesn't mean that you only stick to your guns for your own creation, but also if you work with someone, also make sure that your character that you create with him is also profitable. You have to get funding from that. You have to get investment for that. And there should be some kind of a signed deals between you and a guy who asks you to write for him. And a lot of the times you also have to think about where do my character go from now on. Does he go as an action figure? Does he go, can if it's not going to go as a film in the beginning, go with the simplest thing, go with a novel, right? And it doesn't cost anything, then put it in the market, let have some kind of a audience for that, get some kind of views on it, then you start doing a comic book. It's and this is the closest thing you will get to a movie. Once they see your comic and you want to adapt it into a film, it's easy to envision how the film will be. And this is how I do my business, to be honest with you. And now I'm working on my feature film, and it's based on a comic book that I wrote, and it's all me, it's all my rights, it's all my IP. And a lot of people, a lot of production houses want to do it, but they want to do it by their own style. And I said, no, this is my IP. If you want to fund me with this movie, good. If you're not, I have to find another way to fund it. It's not up to you. It's up to me. I'm the guy who created everything. So I have to stick to what I believe, even if it takes so many years, because on the long run, you're not creating something for 1 or 2 years. You're creating something for the next 20 to 30 to 40. And we have to take Stan Lee and everyone else like Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, Neil Gaiman, Ted McFarlane, Snyder, the guy who created, I think he's a relative to Zach, but
Scott Snyder, is it?
Scott Snyder. Now they're getting a lot of funding and a lot of investment because they're creating these characters.
Yeah, it is. You have to stick to your guns with this stuff because a lot of the people, like the companies, the corporations that are able to bankroll those big projects will want their assets, because that's ultimately they'll want all the assets for it. They're not going to want to allow you to have creative control down the line when they want it, because that is ultimately how the game works now. Every company has their own streaming platforms now, because and it's why Netflix got into the business of creating Netflix originals. It's why they got into the business of making their own content. They were not content creators. They were a distribution company. They were no different than Blockbuster. They just happened to do it online and just survived the storm. But the reality is that it's why everything gets binge dropped in one go, or whatever you want to call it. It's why everything just gets released in one season, one block on a Friday, instead of weekly like other companies. They are a distribution company first and foremost. And what's interesting is that the minute other companies started to see the amount of money Netflix was making off their IP, they started saying, no, we're taking this back. And when Disney said they were going to create their own streaming platforms and pull all their Disney properties off of Netflix got scared, as I'm sure they did when other people started reacting the same way. And that's why Netflix got into the content creation game, so that they would have their own IP. They would have control over their own IP. It's interesting, the whole streaming platform wars that have built up were just about keeping control of IP. That's the name of the game now. It's what PlayStation and Xbox are doing. PlayStation bought a bunch of studios. Xbox bought a bunch of studios, Bethesda, and then Activision Blizzard, and now PlayStation is buying. And I'm sure these things don't just happen overnight. They're deals that take months and months and months to finalize and to arrange. But you know, it's no coincidence that deal is being announced directly after Microsoft made a big deal, one of the biggest deals, and that did hurt PlayStation stock value. It hurt their market value, and this stuff, IP acquisition does hurt other businesses. And also it's why the whole spec screenplay game started out in the first place. When you go back to the 1980s, and there was this whole kind of there was the story of Shane Black, who sold his screenplay while he was still in college. I think it was Lethal Weapon that he sold, and got a few million for it. And everybody started believing, oh wow, there's like this gold rush now in Hollywood. If I can write the next Die Hard, if I can write the next Lethal Weapon or the next Predator or the next Alien or whatever, the studio will want to buy it off me. And you would have people getting phone calls on a Monday. Lethal Weapon would come out on Friday, and then all the agents on Monday would see how popular it was at the box office. They would then say, okay, we need to find the next one. So the assistants would already have, hey, here's a bunch of Lethal Weapon copycats. Okay, get these people on the phone. Let's buy them. Let's see if we can sell them to Paramount, because Warner Brothers, I think it's Warner Brothers, was doing
Yes.
Lethal Weapon. Fox was doing Die Hard. So Paramount would probably want their Lethal Weapon Die Hard franchise as well. So let's get some scripts to them. And Paramount are interested, and we call up Asim, and Asim's now quitting his job by Thursday because he thinks there's $1 million deal on the table by Friday. And then they just move on. They forget about it. Yeah. Or if they did buy the script, they just don't make it because they already have their slate mapped out for months and months and months. You think movie studios just kind of sit there and wait for scripts to come in? No. They have their whole slate planned out. They have billions in investment across the board, all mapped out for several years. They're buying your script, maybe to make it, but most of the time they're buying your script to keep it, to bury it. Because if I can stop you from getting that IP, well, then it's better. So it's not even about acquiring IP to profit from it. It's oftentimes acquiring IP to prevent other people from being able to profit from it. And it's just that it's the game that they're playing, and you as a screenwriter have to play that game too.
Yeah, and this is where the term script vault came out.
Yeah.
That's how they have every studio almost have a huge vault full of scripts that's never been done before, and they just open the vault every couple of years and get a couple of scripts and rewrite them, and put them on the market. And they don't need to buy anything from the new screenwriters, so they already bought it when it was cheap, so they can actually reuse it in 10, 20 years from there. And I think with IPs,
like Fast and the Furious, was it the
yes.
one you were talking about, the Brazilian job turning into the
and a lot of the times is your IP is your ticket to get into these kind of conversations. If you have a very keen, very detailed kind of character that you created, and you spent so much time on him, and that he will make a huge difference in the market. Believe me, people will ask about him more. They want to see what kind of things that's going on, and what kind of story he's going. And they're always going to ask you, "What else? What do you have for me?" So I always have this plan of give them 4 things. Tell them there is a TV series, there is a film, there is a video game, there is a comic, there is something. So when you put in front of these big giant companies that you already did your homework on how to invest in it, they will respect you more.
And it might not be for them, but but you're allowing your IP, your intellectual property, to exist within all the different multimedia avenues that are now available to us.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah. So, good chat I've seen this week.
Thanks.
And we'll move into character. We'll start talking about character creation, I think maybe next week. We'll talk about the different ways that we can be approaching how we approach our own personal kind of approach to character design, and maybe link it back to this in some way in terms of helping to facilitate that kind of a self-investment, I guess, in our own intellectual properties.
Exactly.
Thanks very much, everyone, for listening today. We'll be back again tomorrow with another episode. As I said before, if you haven't already, check out our website, thescriptdepartment.net. Follow us on social media, hit the links in the description, and subscribe to our podcast. Just search for The Script Department and hit us up on YouTube as well. Thanks very much, Asim. Catch you later.